It's a pleasure for me to be able to speak about this government's relationship with McKinsey in follow-up to a question that I asked further. Now, this has been an important issue for me, an important issue for the opposition. Why? Well, there's a number of reasons. First, the government is spending over $100 million, has spent over $100 million on contracts for McKinsey, work that public servants have told the media in many cases could have been done inside the public service. More broadly, we're seeing a significant increase in spending on outside consultants by this government at the same time as we're seeing growth in the public service. So the government is spending more inside the public service, and they're spending more contracting out activities as well, Mr. Speaker. So there's a basic fiscal probity question that's at play here. But there's some other issues that are, I think, very important as we look at the government's relationship with McKinsey. One is that Dominic Barton, the managing partner of McKinsey, was leading the Prime Minister's Growth Council, having special access through that Growth Council to ministers and to the government, at the same time as McKinsey was pitching services for sale to the government. And we know this, in fact, from emails that Mr. Pickersgill, who was working for McKinsey, was supplying analysts for the Growth Council at the same time as he was sending emails to the government requesting work, and we've seen those emails. So very clearly, there are questions of conflict of interest. There are other issues of conflict of interest. The fact that our Minister of Defense yesterday at the Operations Committee was asked, is it acceptable for McKinsey to be doing work for the Canadian Department of Defense at the same time as they're potentially working for other departments of defense for hostile actors around the world, and learning things from our Department of Defense that they may be using in those other interactions. Now, the Minister of National Defense did not know or wasn't willing or able to tell the committee which other departments of defense around the world McKinsey was working for. But we were told by the Deputy Minister, don't worry, because the information, the issues that McKinsey are working on, I mean, they're not that secret. I mean, really, they're just talking about operational, structural details. They're not getting access to national security. It's just operational aspects of the work of government and so forth. But on the other hand, the minister was unwilling to provide basic information about these contracts to the committee unredacted. So what we heard from the Minister of National Defense and her department effectively was that the information, it's not so secret that we need to worry about what McKinsey may be learning and using in their engagements with other hostile powers. But at the same time, that the information is so secret that it couldn't even be shared with members of a parliamentary committee despite the order to produce that content. And a final issue I'll raise tonight, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that McKinsey worked for Purdue Pharma and gave them advice specifically on how to supercharge opioid sales. Now, that's not just an issue of something happening beyond our borders. The opioid crisis has affected so many Canadians. I think every family has in some way been touched by the opioid crisis. And McKinsey specifically advised Purdue Pharma on how to turbocharge their sales engine. Advice included, for instance, how to circumvent traditional pharmacies by operating mail-in pharmacies to circumvent the controls that were being put in place at traditional pharmacies. That advice included paying bonuses for overdoses that occurred, Mr. Speaker. This was advice that McKinsey provided to Purdue Pharma at the same time as McKinsey was working for the Government of Canada, and at the same time as Dominic Barton was leading McKinsey and leading the Prime Minister's Growth Council. So it raises the question, why is this government willing to do business with McKinsey? Why are they comfortable with the risks that this poses in terms of fundamental ethics, the opioid crisis issues, as well as the conflict of interest issues? And we've repeatedly raised the broader question of all the money that's being spent on these outside consultants. The government relationship with McKinsey stinks and needs to be addressed.